Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we'd love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the writer, musician, photographer, artist and graphic designer. It's the one and only John Mendelssohn, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Has just got a book out which is titled David Bowie, San Franscisco, 1971. Yes, John was with Bowie for a day or two to show him the sights, and also took lots of photographs which are available, and I'll put the link in the notes below. But you're going to find out more about John's life, an interesting creative world, in this fascinating interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. John, it's over to you.
My family lived in a suburb in the San Fernando Valley, which a few months before had been an orchard. You know, this was quite common in California. Silicon Valley is the same thing. You know, these areas that were orchards, and then very, very quickly they become developed, and they become, in my case, tracts, TRACTS, you know, where they put 150 houses that are virtually identical. You know, I think Billy Joel wrote about this phenomenon. These communities based on a Long Island community called Levittown, which I think was in the late 40s. But a lot of men who'd been in the service got Federal Housing Administration loans, and they were able to sort of get on the property ladder very cheaply. And my dad was one of those people. So we lived in the San Fernando Valley, and you know, I come from the least musical family in the world. You know, the best they could do between them was turn on the radio. And when I was around 6 or 7, they turned on the radio a lot, and I heard a lot of pre-Elvis pop, some of which I really loved. I really loved. You know, I responded to melody from an early age. And then there was a dry period where I didn't really listen to music very much at all. And then when I was around 15, I went to see West Side Story, the musical, and I just adored the music. I adored Stephen Sondheim's work, and pretty much through 1964, when all my classmates were excited about the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, I was listening nonstop to the soundtrack of West Side Story.
Yes. God, that's unusual.
Then I saw A Hard Day's Night, and everything changed. I thought, this is you know, this is all I want in life. I want to be Ringo.
Yes, absolutely. And did you have any brothers or sisters, older brothers or sisters, who might have given you some sort of cultural awakening or sort of direction or interest?
No, I have a younger sister.
Yes, and so nothing like that. And did your parents I mean, they would have obviously been around during the Second World War. Did they have any contribution to the war effort at that stage, just before you were born?
Walter Reed Hospital in Washington, D.C. is sort of a very famous place. It's where the president goes to be treated. My dad had worked there. He hadn't been overseas or been in combat.
Right. So was he a medical profession? Was that his kind of world?
Well, his ambition, his professional ambition in life was to be a medical illustrator, but that never happened. He certainly wasn't trained as a doctor. I don't know exactly what he did, but he worked there.
Yes. So then, so when you get to 16 in this country, you know, people either, especially in those days, would often have left school by the age of 15. So when you got to 16, did you then stay on to college, or did you?
Oh, yeah. I was the dutiful Jewish son.
Right.
Dutiful. So, you know, I I got very, very good grades throughout school because I was a complete nobody and I was shy and an outcast and miserable. And I thought I'd never go on a date and all this stuff. And so I worked really hard because it was really the only thing that I seemed I could do well. And then
Yes.
when I was a senior in high school, starting at around 17, I got a girlfriend and everything changed. I mean, a really pretty girlfriend, and my status went through the ceiling immediately.
Wow. There you go. I
I
mean,
formed a group. I formed a group in high school called the Fogmen. Yeah, sort of an homage to the fact that I love the British groups, and London Fog, and I kind of used it as a way to improve my social standing because I kind of offered membership in the group to key people who I thought my association with them would enhance my social standing.
yes. Well, at that age, it's all starting to be exciting. Your love of West Side Story. Did you also like Gilbert and is it Gilbert and Sullivan?
No,
Who's that?
I was completely ignorant of them.
Right. So it was just West Side Story. So things like Elvis, Little Richard, Buddy Holly, just not really on your radar. Sort of
Well, briefly,
Fats Domino.
when I was around 11, I liked Buddy Holly, but it was very brief.
Yes, it's just that Lemmy and Bowie, the same year as you, always would say Little Richard and then the usual, but it was always rock and roll and glam and this kind of wow, look at this is happening. But you were loyal to your West Side Story.
Extremely loyal. No, Little Richard didn't. I discovered him later in life.
And when you got this band together, were you the singer at this stage, or had you started to learn an instrument?
The drummer.
The drummer, you were the drummer. So when did you get a drum kit?
I I lived in a neighborhood just north of Pacific Palisades, which was serviced Santa Monica High School. And, they would send buses out. We were the first bus stop on the way to Malibu. I mean, they went all the way out. They went 18 miles up Pacific Coast Highway. I was the best student on any of the three buses. So they gave me a scholarship when I was a senior, $50, but it was $1965, which means that it was about $4,000 in today's money. That's a joke. And then I rushed out and I found a guy who was willing to con me and to sell me most of the drum kit for my full $50.
Excellent. And did it sort of work? Did you get lessons? Did you sort of learn some?
Never, no lessons, and I was terrible. But I didn't. The reason I chose drums was I didn't want to take the time to learn something that was going to be more difficult. I'd played percussion in my junior high school orchestra.
Mm.
Ah, that's see. I went to my best friend's bar mitzvah, and they had this little jazz combo headed by the teacher of music at my junior high school. He played clarinet, and this little combo at this performance, there were kids literally hanging off of him, and I thought, yes, I'd like people hanging off me. David. The thing is, I've always wanted the Pope's balcony, what Tom Wolfe called the Pope's balcony. I've always my sense of self-worth has always been so low that I I longed to be able to step into view of 100,000 people and for them to become rhapsodic at the sight of me.
Yes.
So when I saw the effect that this guy's music had on people, I signed up to be a sort of study percussion, and I was terrible at it, but I got to play a role in the timpani at the beginning of assemblies, and that was like a big moment for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, Hard Day's Night in 1964, a fine year. But then, the 60s started to blossom and excitement started to happen. I mean, by 67, it was the summer of love. Psychedelia was in the air. Did that slightly, those few years, and then you were probably into almost your late teens, were you starting to get excited with that kind of the rise of people like the Doors, Hendrix, Jefferson Airplane? Were you starting to embrace the summer of love and start to sort of?
Well, I embraced it to the extent of being a little faux hippie. That is, I had a necklace that I had made myself, and I would attend class at university barefoot. So that was the extent of my being a hippie. I hated most of the music. I like short songs, and I hate jamming. I hate listening to people noodle around on their instruments. And I thought the Jefferson Airplane was particularly repellent.
When
No,
did
I mean
you?
the Grateful Dead. I mean it just doesn't get worse than that. It just doesn't.
Did you like experiment with the odd little smoke, the little, a little bit of acid? Did you, were you thinking, yeah, tune in, turn on, let's drop out, man? Did you start going that direction? Did you start having flowers in your hair?
Yeah, I mean I was, as I say, I was a faux hippie, and I sort of embraced the look, and I bought myself. I bought myself a caftan on Hollywood Boulevard, in which I felt a perfect brat, but I was trying to keep up. And I had the
Yes,
necklace. The necklace is very important.
the beads, the bead. Did you? I mean, being in that West Coast, did you start sort of becoming aware of the kind of performance artists at that time, like the Coquettes and Fayette
Oh,
and
that
that?
was that was a bit that was later. That was 71. It didn't really interest me that much.
No. Okay. So you were still at college at this stage, 67, even though you could have gone to San Francisco, going to the Golden Gate Park to listen to, the Dead, Allen Ginsberg. I mean, was he somebody you went, yeah, I love that poetry. It's just, we're there. You mentioned Tom Wolfe. Did sort of Ginsberg come into your consciousness?
No, although I did write a poem a few weeks ago, uh, imagining Trump's first cabinet meeting, and I paid a small homage to him. I said, I have seen the worst minds of my generation ruined by greed and careerism, or whatever it was. But I
Yes.
mean, I became aware of him uh, much, much later.
Yeah. Did you go on to university and study or college and have a subject that you were particularly focused on during this period of the late 60s?
Sociology. I got
Sociology.
my degree in sociology.
Useful. That is useful, isn't it? Did you enjoy
It's
it?
terribly useful. It's like the joke. If you have a degree in philosophy, what is the phrase that you're going to be using most in your adult life? And the answer is pizza. Pizza is here, because that's what you'll be doing. You'll be delivering pizza.
Yes, but
Well, I
well,
could have gone on and maybe gotten a job in social work, but I was very, very lucky because I started writing in my senior year at university, and I was instantly successful to my absolute bewilderment. I mean, within a few months, I was in the summer before my senior year. I was bored and lonely, sort of the story of my life.
mhm.
And I, just to amuse myself, I wrote a diatribe against the Doors, whom I detested. And the editor of the art supplement of the university newspaper loved it. He became sort of my mentor. In fact, yeah, and things just started falling into place instantly. Within a couple of months, I was writing for the Los Angeles Times, and I got offered a job at Warner Brothers Records, and everything I did worked.
At that point, were you a little bit worried that you were going to get drafted into the Vietnam War and go off to fight?
Extremely. But by virtue of having been offered this job and making what at the time was a great deal of money for a 22-year-old, I was able to hire a sympathetic psychiatrist who certified my psychiatric unsuitability for the military.
Yes. You were going to be, you were too existential for that, weren't you? It was not going to work. You wouldn't have fitted in.
No, God, no.
God, that must have been quite worrying at the time as well. That must have been horrendous. So why did you, if you weren't into those bands that you were right in the middle of, and most people would be so envious of that situation, what made you want to write about them and actually study something that you seemed quite repelled about?
Well, I mean, there were a lot of terrific groups, other than the San Francisco ones. I mean, Procol Harum and the Move and other groups like that I adored, and I wrote about them too.
But they were British groups.
Yeah, well, I always preferred British groups, always.
So you're in the West Coast, San Francisco, in the 60s. They're all there, aren't they? Morrison, Jerry Garcia, Grace Slick, Hendrix.
I lived in Los Angeles, but yeah, I mean, they were all in California.
You could have been just bumping into them down at the Whiskey, having a great time, and you just went, no, Procol Harum, Salty Dog, The Move. It's amazing. I suppose I was thinking, God, most people would be so envious. They'd want to, go back there in a TARDIS, wouldn't they, and live that moment with you.
Well, I mean, there were things that were enviable. I began receiving great armfuls of records in the mail.
Yes.
I mean, that was good and bad. It was bad in the sense that in my college days, I'd had 6 albums, and each of them was a dear personal friend. I knew every word. When I started getting great piles of albums, it sort of ruined things for me, because I felt quite guilty if I didn't listen to them all. So what I did was I didn't listen to any of them. I traded them in.
Yes, well, absolutely. It's supplemented. So when you wrote your first review on The Doors, what was the kind of essence that you found, because they wrote, Break On Through, very snappy song. It was, I mean, was it the lyrics? Was it the sentiment? Was it the Lizard King?
No, yeah, it was mostly the Lizard King, and a very large part of it was my second girlfriend, who had broken my heart, loved them.
Oh, yes. Oh, this is the air you just couldn't. You were just going to go for a whiter shade of pale after that, weren't you? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I auditioned for an early version of The Doors, actually. I don't even remember who was in it. But yeah, I went to an audition. In high school, I'd taken physics as a senior, and that whooshing sound you hear is the sound of physics going right over my head. I mean, I was completely baffled. On two final exams, one semester and then the next semester, I got a cumulative score of 0. There was nothing on my worksheet that indicated to the instructor that I had the slightest idea of any of it. So what do I do the minute I arrive at UCLA? I sign up to take astronomy, which turns out to be physics. But the good thing in that class was there was a guy, this guitar player, who I think was a big pal of Robbie Krieger's, and through him I went to this audition.
Yes, my God, that's amazing. And just at that point, being in LA at this stage, I mean, obviously Charles Manson is kind of sort of in the vibey area. So did that sort of give you any heebie-jeebies, or did you sort of feel attracted to it, repelled by it? Did you feel intrigued by it?
Well, I felt repelled by the fact that he got his gang to murder people. Didn't affect me. I mean, it was something that happened miles away and not to anyone I knew.
Yes, I know. It must have just spoilt the '60s love vibe at that stage with, I mean, there's
No,
also
I had David. I had enough of my own problems without without Charles Manson making any sort of impact on my life.
Yes, well, absolutely, yeah. So then, as we crept into the '70s, I mean, obviously there was a bit of a, Brian Jones dies, and then we had Hendrix, Morrison, and Joplin, who you probably were probably a little bit ambivalent about because you weren't that in love. But the '60s kind of ends in a bit of a downer, obviously with Manson as well. So where are you in the '70s? Are you then starting to write kind of on a regular basis with the LA Times at that stage?
Yeah, the LA Times and Rolling Stone, which made me sort of internationally known.
And you'd finished university at this stage as well.
Yeah.
Right. So this was your main gig. So that's so then, because in '70, I mean, Bowie's, sort of he's been pottering around in the '60s for quite a while, and things are just starting to change for him in '70, '71. So when does he come onto your kind of, I say that because you obviously got a book about Bowie at this stage, haven't you, from '71. So how does he come onto your radar? Because, his '60s work, let's face it, isn't completely memorable, is it?
The what wasn't?
His '60s work, his output in the '60s,
it's dreadful.
I was trying to be kind to his work, actually. But if it wasn't for his next period, we wouldn't have remembered his '60s work that much, I think.
How it came about was the guy who had been the editor of the art supplement of my college newspaper had gone on to become a publicist for Mercury Records. He called me up and said, would you like to go to San Francisco to interview this English singer? We'll pay your expenses. I said, of course I would. And they sent me the Man Who Sold the World album, and I didn't like it at all, but I wasn't about to turn down an all expenses paid trip to San Francisco. So I went. Liked him very much, didn't like the music at all.
Yes, I know. That was strange. So with this particular publication that's out and about, are these your photographs, by the way, of Mr. Bowie?
Yeah.
So what was the day like? Did you have a whole day with him, or part of a day?
I had a weekend with him, and then and then the following year, my girlfriend and I visited London, and that was a memorable experience too, because he was just breaking then, and he and Angie took me and my girlfriend to dinner at this chic bistro in London, and his girlfriend was trying with all her might to pull my girlfriend, and it was quite funny. We'd been staying at a place in Notting Hill called the Portobello Hotel, and it was one of those places like Granny Takes a Trip, where you would come in and they would sort of look at you like, who are you? It's like, what are you doing in our hotel? Well, the night that the Bowies took us to dinner, and then took us back to the hotel, and they saw us getting out of the car in which the Bowies were riding, their attitude changed completely.
Yes.
Suddenly they couldn't do enough for us.
Yes, that's right. And what did you just potter around San Francisco taking pictures? I mean, this was a sort of a PR, was it a kind of a PR trip on Mercury Records that you had in San Francisco at that stage? Yeah. And I mean, it's just such a sort of such a weird such a weird time. Did you sort of meet Rodney Bingham High at that stage? Rodney?
I'd known him for years.
Right. What was he like, little Rodney? Was he the John Peel of LA at that stage?
God, no. I mean, the thing about Rodney was, this probably isn't for publication, but he's really dim. I mean, he's really dim. And he was just sort of like a shameless groupie, and became notable for it because he was so shameless. I mean, he was everywhere. He was just absolutely everywhere. I went through a period when I was during my faux hippie period, when I had drawn these posters, and I would go to the Sunset Strip of a weekend evening and sit there on a wall a block away from the whiskey and sell these posters to passersby for 25 cents. And Rodney always used to come by with a small entourage of 14-year-old girls and say, "What's happening?"
Oh,
I mean, that was pretty much the extent. Well, I mean, he wasn't a malignant sort of character. He was nice enough, but you weren't going to sit down and have much of a conversation with him.
No, not much going on there, really.
He schmoozed. He just schmoozed everybody in sight.
Yeah, there was just some.
I mean, not just rock stars, but Connie Stevens. You know, people who were TV stars, stuff like that. Anybody who was a star, he was all in.
He was all there. Yeah, no, there was some sort of interesting and bizarre characters. Obviously, there was those books written about groupies. I can't remember her name now.
Pamela DeBar.
Yes, that's the woman. And then there's people like Kim Fowley and, you know, Morris Levy, who was kind of on the scene. There was some just sort of odd.
Morris Levy was the president of Roulette Records on the East Coast. He was nowhere near L.A.
Oh, thank God for that. Yes, okay. I'm just picking names out. So then you were did you enjoy being a writer at this stage? Were you enjoying that process and did you get sort of mentored? How did it come easily to you? I mean, it seems like...
Well, it came very easily to me, and I loved the attention, and I loved being thought of as like a star in my own right, and I hated the intense case of imposter syndrome that I suffered from, because I didn't think I was very good, and it was I look back on that work, and I can see that I was absolutely right. I mean, most of it is just really awful, but people really liked it, and I liked being famous. I liked being. So, I mean, speaking of Rodney, I went to the apartment building he lived in for some reason to see somebody else at one point, and he opened his door while I was walking by, and he was really amazed that he was in my presence. I mean, I enjoyed that sort of thing, because, as I said, Pope's balcony,
Yes, there you go. You were there. And then sort of LA Times, Rolling Stone. I mean, things obviously sort of picked up. But then, as the 70s progressed, we had sort of, I suppose, there would been the birth of heavy metal, there was prog rock, there was glam, there was the LA sort of confessional singer-songwriters with people like Joni Mitchell and James Taylor, Neil Young happening. we'd had Crosby, Stills and Nash. So where were you going with your kind of musical direction at this stage?
Well, my band was sort of pulled in two different directions. We started off wanting to be the Who. I was the drummer in the group that became Sparks for a short while, and I got invited to leave the group by virtue of the fact that they were really cute, and I thought that cute was really sickening. So I suggested that maybe we break things at the end, and they weren't at all pleased with that idea. So I mean, I wanted to have short, punchy songs with witty lyrics, and the guitar player in the band, who was sort of the dominant musical personality, because I hadn't troubled myself to learn much about music at that point, wanted to be Yes.
Was that James
I desperately didn't want to be Yes.
Was that James
No,
Mankey?
Earl Mankey was the guitar player in the group that became Sparks, and his brother was the bass player for a while.
Yeah, because one of them went on to be in a band called the Concrete Blondes.
Yes, that was Jim, the younger brother.
Jim, yeah, with Jeanette, who was the lead singer.
Yeah.
He was just amazing. God, I love that band. So how did you? So you were part of that the early years of Sparks, the formation of Sparks.
Very briefly.
Very briefly, yeah. So Earl was on guitar, and Jim was on bass. Yes, but then that was very brief. So then, what happened to the next part of your musical moment up from there?
Well, we were signed to Warner Brothers and produced by Chris Thomas, who was quite a famous English producer at that time. In Excess, Elton John, Paul McCartney, Pete Townsend, Pink Floyd, and the Beatles' White Album. And the public didn't go for it, which is something that drives me crazy. I mean, 50 years after the fact, I occasionally speak to people, and they talk about how terrific we were. And I think, where were you at the time? Nobody thought we were terrific at the time. It's just like, oh, thank you.
Yes, yeah.
But I kept going. The Stuntman, a film with Peter O'Toole, there's a great line where he's talking to some young woman, and she asks him a question about what he is exactly, and she says, you're an actor, and he says, "Madam, I'm no actor, I'm a movie star." And that was, kind of like, I wasn't a musician. I was somebody thinking that my charisma and the fact that I desperately wanted it would suffice.
Yes.
Sparks are still around, and it drives me crazy. It just drives me crazy.
Because there was a award-worthy or winning documentary about the band a few years ago, wasn't there, as well?
I made a point of not seeing it.
No, I haven't seen it either. But yes, I mean, yeah. Why did it drive you crazy? By the way, it
drives me crazy because they were our arch rivals. They were playing the same little circuit we were, playing to audiences of 4 people, just like we were. And then 2 of them moved to the UK, and they had a hit. Okay, that was fine. It was a good record, but 50 years after the fact, they're playing the Albert Hall. And I think that in a way, they're very, very good, but they're also unrelentingly cute. They're nothing but cute. It's everything is about how witty they are, and I don't think that that's, you know, my own personal perception is that I'm just as witty as they are, but I can do other things too, and I do other things. They don't. They never. They're never soulful. They're never real. They never give you a glimpse into who who they are or
Yes.
what they believe. It's just always, cute.
Cute, and well, we were all not traumatized, but kind of fascinated when we saw them on Top of the Pops, and obviously kind of confused with the keyboard player's rather fetchy moustache. So it's sort of they had that, what do they call it? Unique selling point, USP. Yeah, so as the 70s progressed and you didn't want to be Yes, but then when punk started to come along, how did that influence your kind of musical taste with people like Suicide, the Ramones, the Dams?
I had a band in early 1977 called the Pits
Yes.
that played all my songs because I'd learned how to write songs and I'd become musical. I learned about music, and we came along just a little bit too early. Well, the band was really, really good players, three really good players, but two of them were quite young. I was almost 30 at the time, and two of them were like 21 or 22, and they were deeply into Deep Purple and looking like Deep Purple. So we didn't go over real well with the growing punk audience.
No, that was not going to happen, was it, really? How long did the band last for, the Pits?
About 11 months.
Right. But you signed to, was it Greg Shaw's Bop Records label?
Yeah.
Did you get a single out at this stage? Did you go into the studio?
EP.
An EP.
Yeah.
God. It's hard to track your material down, isn't it? You kind of, would be great to sort of archive all your albums and work.
Well, there aren't that many that have been actually published. I mean, in 2021, I wrote a 10-song album every month for the first 10 months that pretty much is nobody's ever heard, in spite of my efforts to get it heard.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, 10 songs a month, 10 new songs from scratch. Some of them weren't. I look back and some of them didn't really hold up, but I mean, I'd say that about 5 of every 10 were, I'm quite proud of.
Oh, fantastic. Got you 2021. Yes, that was our period where we could make or break after COVID, really, wasn't it?
It was during COVID, so that's kind of why I committed to it.
Yeah, that was. Did you keep, when you were in the band, were you still kind of writing for LA Times, Rolling Stone?
No, that had ended. I mean, there were. When I look back at it, I marvel at how much gall I had, because I mean, I would write. See, the thing about my writing career, I was extremely influenced by a British writer named Nick Cohn.
Yes.
And
I think I've got a book of his up here, actually. Yes. Oh, yes. This is the famous one, isn't it?
That's the one. Yeah. I mean, that propelled me into, I mean, I perfected a very good Nick Cohn imitation.
Right.
And suddenly my career took off. The thing was, as a critic, as a music critic, you have to write about a lot of stuff that you just, you don't really feel anything about it. I mean, you just think it's not for me, but you have to write about it as though you have strong feelings about it. So what I did was I sort of made my name by things that I felt bored by. I didn't think that anybody benefited by my writing a boring, sober review of something that I didn't find at all interesting. So I would just murder people. So
Yeah.
I would murder somebody in the LA Times, and then a week later we'd be opening for them.
Nice. My goodness, you must have been popular. Um, yeah. Was it easy to sort of murder people at this stage? Was it just easy to get into the work and
Oh,
think,
extremely easy, because I have a lot of resentment.
you have a dark side, don't you?
I'm not so sure I have a light side, but I mean, I was sort of striking out at the world.
Yes. My God, you were like the Hunter S. Thompson, weren't you? Did people like Nick Kent come onto your kind of radar? Because he was another writer of that time who started to make his name as a bit of a rock and roll, NME writer.
Just vaguely aware of him,
Yeah,
and
no,
since I've become more aware of him, I thought that he really wasn't very good.
right, just straight there. Yeah, God. Well, I know there's a few places where you can find some old reviews. That'd be. Are they? Do you have them on your website at all? Your reviews, or have they sort of just been
Oh
archived?
God, no! I do anything for people not to read them.
Oh,
Really, I mean,
yeah,
they're just awful. I
right.
mean, there's occasionally I'd say something illuminating, and the things that I loved passionately. So the move never acquired an audience in America, but I any audience they had was because of me, I think, because I raved about them in Rolling Stone, and you know I, I'm I was very famous, and I continue to think that to live in terror of the fact that on my tombstone it will say he panned the first two Led Zeppelin albums, because that's what people know about me. They know that I didn't like Led Zeppelin and I loved the Kinks around the Village Green Preservation Society time. But what's interesting about the Led Zeppelin is, what is it? Uh, Maybe 52 years after the fact. This is in contradiction to what I was saying about not being boring. I got the first Led Zeppelin album when I was in college, a few months after I'd started writing regularly for the art supplement. And I wrote a really boring sort of responsible review, and about how they needed an editor and this and that. And it was really dull and a really bad piece of work. 50 years after the fact, I have a lot of stuff of my own on SoundCloud. And this guy tracked me down, and he went like he found 10 of my songs, and after each of them he wrote something like, "This is crap. How could you say that about Jimmy Page?" It's remarkable. 50 years after the fact, people are still, and people still say, don't you feel embarrassed about what you wrote about them? Don't you feel much differently now? And I always say, I do feel much differently. I hate them much more now than I actually did then.
Yes, well, absolutely. It's good to.
So antithetical to anything I liked. I mean, I liked melody and good lyrics and harmony singing, and there wasn't a trace of any of that. It was all that shrieking.
Yes, it's yes, I didn't quite get Led Zeppelin like a lot of people did of my generation. But then that's I was, yeah, like I said, Bowie was the one, and then after that, just various pop chart stuff from the 70s that then went into indie pop in the 80s, really. So then as the 70s progressed, obviously then, you know, the music scene's changed and your band, you know, the Pits, you know, you've done an EP, you know, we're together for 11 months. How does your 70s finish? You know, and are you still in America at this stage or have you relocated?
Yeah.
Yes. How are you
Finished in
survive?
just
How are you surviving though in the 70s?
barely, because you know if you draw a graph, my ability on this axis and the success of my writing on another, they just cross. So when I started to get good, at what I do, people stopped liking it, and
Right.
so by the end of the 70s, it was pretty grim.
Yes, God, at that stage, I mean, musically though, we'd suddenly had people like Steely Dan. There was that band America. Yacht rock starts to appear. Michael McConnell? No, McDonald, Toto. People like that. Did that sort of musical genre? Did that appeal to you in musicality or style or form?
No, I hated it.
You hated that.
Mhm.
Because I kind of wondered if you know the you know you could appreciate the craft or the
Yeah,
melody.
I did in some cases. I appreciated the musicianship, but I mean the put the whole thing together, and it just did nothing for me. As a general
Right.
rule.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. So you know, there's Reagan. Then obviously in this country, you know, Thatcher gets in, and then you know the UK has this kind of 10 years with Thatcherism. We had the Falkland War, the miners' strike, Greenham Common. It all feels very like the world's about to die. How do you then navigate that next decade? You've done the 60s and the 70s. What's your 70s to the 80s like at this point?
Well, lots of frustration professionally. I got married and had a daughter in '84.
Right.
Uh, you know, the one thing, what I think that I've done best in the world, in anything I've done, is be my daughter's father. The fact that she hasn't spoken to me in 23 years suggests that I might be overestimating the job I did. Uh,
Yes. God. So
yeah, I mean, I really liked a lot of '80s music. You know, in the early '80s after punk, there was a lot of melodic, poppy music, and you know, I like pop. I like pop more than rock because
yeah.
I think it's more subversive. I think it's more interesting. I mean, I find a lot of rock sort of harsh and
So did you like people like ABC or Sade or Duran Duran or the Buzzcocks? Or the Smiths? The Smiths came along, you know, Morrissey from Manchester, Mar, and I mean, what was your kind of musical taste like at this stage as we entered into a new period?
well, I disliked all the ones you mentioned.
Excellent. I thought I tried hard there. I couldn't. I think
But
pop in the early 80s, XTC. I don't know.
XTC, I love them. I love
Right.
them.
Oh,
Uh,
Talk. You went. Oh, I love Talk.
Talk. Oh no,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
it's my life. I think is heavenly. Is sublime.
Yeah.
Absolutely sublime. I mean, that is such a gorgeous record. I mean, I rushed out and bought the album, and the album just left me completely cold. But that track is like my idea of heaven.
Right.
Uh,
Oh, that's.
uh, come on, Eileen.
Oh,
Uh,
Dexy's mid.
I just love that. I just love that. And as recently as 24 hours ago, you know, I can't hear it without, you know, even though my knees are in very bad shape. I've had surgery on my knees recently.
You
My
can do
wife
the
and I were,
dance, can't you? You and Kevin, you can do your Kevin dance.
yeah. Well, I mean, we were walking along last night in Malta, and Come On Eileen was coming out of this restaurant, and she knew what was going to happen, and it did. I just dun, 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 dun.
Oh, that's so
And the
sweet.
Cocteau twins. There is nothing more beautiful than Heaven or Las Vegas. I mean, that just transports me every time I hear it.
Beautiful,
Just
yes.
sublimely beautiful.
Yeah. And at this stage, were you writing, or had you sort of had because you did a book on the Kinks at this stage, hadn't you? You'd written your
85.
85. So who was your publisher for the King? Was that Omnibus Books?
No, it was an American publisher, William Morrow, which was a big publishing house at the time.
And was it, being given that kind of contract or that sort of assignment, what was it like going from sort of writing reviews to suddenly, God, I've got to write a book? This is quite different.
Deeply frustrating. They wouldn't talk to me, so I had to. And this is pre-internet, so I mean, you get on the internet now and you can mine things. You can mine a ton of stuff. I had to go to their record company and throw myself on the mercy of their publicist to look through their folder of clippings and try to put together a book based on those clippings.
Yes.
That happened to me with the Pixies too. You know, when I came here in the early part of this century, I got commissions to write books about Kate Bush and the Pixies. The Pixies wouldn't speak to me either, and it was hellish. I had to fill up the book by writing in detail about their music, which I detested.
Yeah. And Kate Bush?
Well, the reason there were a couple of things that I adored, but it was well known that she wouldn't talk to people. So I sold the editor on the idea of my writing a novel about a guy who was obsessed with her, and intermingling it with whatever biographical things of interest I could find.
And out of those 3 books, which one would you recommend?
I wouldn't recommend any of them.
Oh no!
I mean, maybe the Kate Bush one, the Pixies one. Boy, early in my career, when I didn't think I was very good, people would say things to me like, I don't read your stuff because I agree with you. I read it for the poetry. And I thought, whoa, that's a compliment I'm going to savor till my dying day, and have. But so they published this book about the Pixies, and Amazon is full of people saying this guy can't write, and he's and just slammed mercilessly by all these Pixies fans I pissed off by expressing my true opinion of the Pixies.
Nice. There you go. Yeah, Frank Black. Yes, well, that's good. So then, are you still in America during the sort of mid-80s at this point?
Yeah, I came over in 2002.
Right. So then, but how do you then survive your late 80s and the 90s? What's that like for you? Because then sort of we have the grunge period that starts to appear. There's a dance scene that starts. Ecstasy appears on the kind of the late 80s. How does that sort of gel with your sort of lifestyle at this point and what you're up to?
Well, I just scraped along, but in the beginning of the 90s, this record company hired me to write a newsletter, and I convinced them to let me design it too. I've always loved graphic design, and of all the things I do, I think that's what I do best. And in the Walt Disney version of The Wind in the Willows, there's a moment where Mr. Toad sees his first motor car, and his eyes turn into pinwheels. You know, he's absolutely transfixed. Well, that was me with my first Macintosh when the record company agreed to buy me this computer so that I could do the design.
Yes.
It was like being in heaven. I was so deeply happy, you know, and worked really hard on it and would forget to go to sleep, would forget to eat or drink. I just sat there and designed this stuff. And so by the middle of the decade, I was getting hired as a graphic designer. And then at the end of the decade, before the internet bubble burst in San Francisco, I just felt like I could walk down the street and reach up and somebody would be handing me a job offer, always for more money than the last one. So that was pretty wonderful. And then the bubble burst, and I came over. I got married.
So what was the record label that hired you initially to write a newsletter?
Zoo. ZOO. They had Matthew Sweet, if you've ever heard of him.
Oh yes, Matthew Sweet.
They had the best hip hop artist ever, in my opinion, who's Tongue Twister. Have you ever heard of Tongue Twister?
No.
I think he was from Chicago. I think he just calls himself Twista now, but he was really musical. His raps were like tap dancing. He would throw in all these triplets, and it was and the words, would do that, and he was pretty terrific. So, and Tool. Do you know Tool?
Oh yes, I've come across Tool. So, my God, there's some.
What they do isn't to my taste, but what they do really well. It's like that sort of really arty grunge.
Yes, so that was on Zoo Records.
Yeah,
because I knew there's a label in Liverpool called Zoo Records, but they were quite tiny actually. So yeah. So was that the 90s then that you were doing that?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, Zoo Entertainment. Right. So your 90s was quite a nice period, wasn't it? You managed to sort of do.
Starting with the I did my own online magazine about dominatrices. The idea of it was that I was going to interview dominatrices and find the real person behind the facade.
Yes.
Which was how I met my wife. It was really an excuse for me to design things and to make a beautiful website, and that attracted this guy who has a right-wing think tank in Washington D.C. He flew me across the country to do a website, the Alexis de Tocqueville Institute or something, and paid me a fair amount of money, and it was so that was quite good. Then I got over here in 2002, and it was dreadful. I thought that I'd also written for Cream. That's something I forgot to mention. So I sort of got by a little bit by writing for Cream. After my daughter was born, I took a job as a word processor in a fascist law firm in San Francisco. This law firm was in the business of defending environmental polluters.
Right. They didn't advertise themselves as fascist.
No.
But they were just Oh God! And did you feel like you sold your soul at this point to
Yes,
to to
yes.
the
It was
to the
hellish. It was hellish. I worked. Well, they banished me from place to place in this huge firm because I was forever mouthing off or one thing or another, or doing the work very poorly indeed, because I hated it. I didn't want to be good at it. And I would I would think at the end of every day, either I or one of these attorneys is going to go out the window. And
amazing.
then I would have an hour and a half commute back to the wine country where I live. Now that was the mid '80s. I forgot to mention that.
Yes. Oh yeah, I
It was still the,
mentioned. I mean, Cream magazine's kind of famous for Lester Bangs. Did you sort of come across Lester at all on your travels?
yeah.
And what was he like as a character? Because he's got
Well,
this.
he was uh, when he was sober, he was very sweet. He was never sober,
Right.
and he was an abrasive asshole.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I never thought you had very good taste in music. Actually, I could never quite buy into this. Oh my God, Lester Bangs is this amazing writer. But I've always been a bit like, actually, I'm not that. I don't think he's got very good taste in music. So I say taste, but I don't know. I don't think I'd have gone for his record collection. I'd have thought, Lester, can I put something on now? Because I don't think you've got it really. But anyway, he's
Yeah, but
dead.
if someone's a good writer, I don't care what their opinion is, and I certainly don't care about their taste. I just care about them, the beauty of their prose, or like if they crack jokes, and God knows he always cracked jokes. Yeah,
Yes.
I thought he was pretty overrated. Did you know of a guy called Richard Meltzer?
Richard Mal? No, Richard.
Oh, he
No.
was sort of associated with Lester Bangs. He made a career of in print. He impersonated like uh, a plumber in the Bronx. He just sort of was really stupid, and it was like performance art because his record reviews, would always have nothing at all to do with the record, literally nothing, and he would just go off on some tangent, and he would, the writing wasn't good. It was like he was impersonating this character who was semi-literate and stupid. So, but people loved him, and there was a period especially in the '70s, of intense masochism on the part of the American record uh, industry. They would throw these lavish parties to introduce you to their artists, and there would be mountains of lobster and crab and shrimp and champagne. And this guy, Richard Meltzer, sort of made a career of being really disgusting, like pulling his pants down and peeing in the punch bowl at these parties. And I sort of liked that, but uh,
Who did he
not the
write
right.
for? Did he write for
Uh,
Cream as well?
yeah, for a while. I mean, I came along in the '80s after Lester Bangs had left.
Yes, I've never come across Richard. Richard, what was it? How do you pronounce spell his surname?
Meltzer.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I'll have a look and see if he's still about. So then what was it like to relocate to the UK at this stage?
It was terrible, just terrible. I thought by virtue of the fact that I was, well, when I met Charles Shar Murray,
Yes.
uh, he told me that I'd been an idol of his, and I was very pleased about that. And I'd always that first trip when I came to the UK and Bowie took us to dinner, I was sort of mini mobbed in Selfridges because I was writing for a British magazine called Disc and Music Echo, and
Right.
my column had a photograph of me above it, and these three girls recognized me and they started squealing. So I thought, I'll at least be able to do some writing about music, even though I don't want to write about music anymore. Uh, and I contacted Mojo, and they essentially said, "Thanks so much for being in. Leave your number. We'll give you a call." And the call never came.
Yes. My God. So your 2000s were tricky, weren't they? Whereabouts in the UK were you living at this stage?
Finchley, and then Teddington first, Finchley, and Ham since 2005. Ham
Yes.
is between Kingston and Richmond.
And this was with your second wife, Claire.
Yeah,
Blimey. Yeah, God. So
famous for having gone to the grammar school that produced Elton John, and for having had a band at that school in which she invited Simon Le Bon not to be in the band.
Oh no, Claire, God, she could have. So she hung out with Simon.
No. She told him, thank you very much anyway. She describes him as sort of a fat embarrassment at the time.
Right.
Later he became a slim embarrassment during their reign of terror.
Yes, well, I don't. He's still doing his thing, isn't he, little Simon? That's all nice. So then you're still writing albums and doing bits and pieces, aren't you? So how do you then sort of navigate your next part of your career at this stage? Because obviously we've all got computers, graphic design's not such a sort of kind of like, wow, that's how do you do that? Everyone's able to do it. So how do you manage to sort of eke out the next chapter in your life at this point?
I wish I knew. I mean, a sense of purposelessness. I mean, I get bored easily, and I find boredom very painful. And I write an essay every day for Substack, and it's really not working very well. I mean, there are people on there who have 20,000 subscribers and who make a fair amount of money. I have, after like 8 months, I have 500 subscribers, and I make a pittance, and I receive a pittance, what is essentially equivalent to a British pension. I get Social Security, so that's what I live on. But I don't earn any money, And David, I've written what, 14 novels. None of which has been published. The closest any of them has come. Well, if you go to my website, there's a whole page devoted to my fiction,
Yes.
and I have 6 short story collections of 20 stories each, and I've sort of thrown up my hands and given up. I just feel completely powerless, which is a horrible feeling, because I write a novel and I send it to. I write what I think is a fairly arresting query letter, and I send it out to 80 agents, and maybe 2 of them will respond. One of the 2 will say thanks anyway, and then the other one will be like a junior who is just been instructed to read everything possible. So I mean, I have all this fiction that no one will ever read, and
Yeah.
it just seems too painful to keep writing novels. So I write these essays every day.
Which is obviously a bit more immediate, and still making music as well, though.
Yeah,
You're still on the music front, and I'm sort of looking ahead to this year and the rest of the decade, have you got any kind of ideas of your next projects, or is it sort of your daily meditations on life?
Musically, you mean?
Well, just music or creatively. I just wondered what your sort of next steps are going to be on sort of your project, because I know you've got a new album out on Bandcamp, haven't you? At this,
Well, it was new. It was new as of last spring. That was all we are saying is give fascism a chance.
Yes.
Which I thought would attract a fair amount of interest, and didn't.
Yeah, and the Christian right is like a beacon.
That's right. That's one of the tracks.
Yes, so that's I mean, do you get sort of, I mean, with this latest kind of political chapter in our lives coming up, do you feel inspired or intrigued about writing another album, kind of on sort of the basis of what's kind of happened at the inauguration in today, in fact?
If it's hard for me, it's very hard for me to accept that the idea that my work will not be considered, that no one will hear it, that no one will read my fiction, and no one will hear my music. That's painful, and it takes the pen out of my hand. I mean, I think, why bother? And that's a very painful position to be in, because you just get bored, and I think, I'm completely impotent. I'm completely powerless to change my life. And but there's this idea that you don't do it for the reward, you do it for the work. And sometimes, fairly often, when I'm working on music or graphic design or something, I get so much pleasure. It's like that moment in Chariots of Fire where the Scottish missionary is talking to his sister, and his sister is trying to talk him out of going to the Olympics and to remain in the seminary and become ordained or whatever it is.
I just watched that film. It's so bizarre that, this thing about running on a Sunday. Oh, the sister was so uptight.
Well, there's one moment that's always resonated for me. He says to her, "When I run, I can feel God's pleasure." And when I do the things I do, sometimes I feel God's pleasure. And I have to sort of train myself for that to be enough, because I'm probably not going to be publicly acclaimed. I'm probably not going to get the Pope's balcony.
No. But then in the next couple of weeks, you've got the publication of the Bowie. Is that the publication of it, or you're going to be doing a public talk about this particular event that's coming up?
3 events. The problem with that is, I mean, it sounds very good to me in view of the fact that I'll kind of be the center of attention for these 3 evenings.
Yes.
The part that I don't like is, can you guess?
Wait a minute. You're going to be sharing the stage with someone else?
No, it's more.
You're talking about somebody else?
Well, yeah. I'm of interest to people by virtue of my association with a third party.
Yes.
I want to be found fascinating in my own right.
Yes. So with this particular book that's coming out, did it come out a few years ago on Norton Records?
No, it's not. it's not really a book. It's like a 1,200 word reminiscence that I wrote several years ago. And I mean, you probably shouldn't relate that, but a part of me is gratified that people are interested, and there's going to be a signing, and people are going to want my autograph. But the fact that they're going to want my autograph for having written about this very brief period when I was pals with this person who became the living God, which I don't begin to understand. I mean, really nice guy. Just never have gotten the music particularly.
Yes, my God. So
I wrote a
yes,
song about him. There was a song in one of the 2020 albums. After I read somewhere, someone said that Prince, Mozart, and David Bowie are all sort of in the same class. I thought, fuck me, I can't. Mozart, and I wrote a mocking song called David Bowie, Golden Genius.
Oh, yes, that's right. But yeah, so how did they sort of put this little event together? Because it seems like you got Paul Gorman, who I've got various books by, Miriam, is it Lena?
I don't know. I think it's Lena, or as in my case, she might have got used to people mispronouncing it and settled for Lena.
Yes, and then conversation with Stephen Coates.
Don't know these people.
No, you don't know them. So have you been prepped on what you're going to be, the evening's going to be like? And yes, all the great and the good in London are going to be there? Have you worked out what you're going to be wearing?
Yeah, there are three performances. I'm an actor too. I produced. I had a succession of sketch comedy groups in San Francisco, and a couple in London. And I was thinking of doing the appearances in character, but Claire is very, very fervently opposed to the idea.
Did she say, no, don't do that? Don't.
I was going to do this Eastern European, so I met David Bowie, and we went to San Francisco, and it's very good to have in the, do the whole thing in character, and then do the next one as a different character.
That would have.
I'll show you.
Oh, you've gone. The archives.
Yeah. Can you see that?
No, you've disappeared.
Okay.
You're going to have to. You're just basically a flower. Oh, you got a cape.
Cowboy shirt.
Oh, yeah. I bet Claire said, no, don't do that either.
I had a brief career busking. When I was in Spain a few years ago, I realized that there's some country music that I just love. So I worked up a repertoire, and I was busking. I performed in Spain and I was going to come in character and talk like this. Yeah, I'd like to talk to you about David Bowie tonight and tell you all about our adventures together.
Yeah, you could spin. Yeah, we made an album. Yeah, we did a country album that's never been. I've still got the tapes. I mean, God, people would be excited. Actually, you're gonna have to. So, how are you going to tackle this evening? So you got one on the 23rd, and then another two events. Yeah. Are they all in London, by the way?
Yeah.
My God, so you're gonna have to really do the business, aren't you, with this? Yeah. Have you worked out how you're going to spin this evening into an amusing anecdotal love fest?
Well, the problem is that that everything I have to say, I said in the book. I was thinking of making things up, you know. I told Claire my idea of making things up, and she was greatly opposed to it.
She's
I
blocking your creative energy, isn't she?
Well, she doesn't want me to make a fool of myself. But as you know, there was an event I did maybe 2005 or something with Charles Shaar Murray and Will Self.
Oh my God, that must have been a fantastic evening.
Oh, it was horrible for me.
Oh.
I mean, I just wasn't good. I felt really, Will Self sort of took over completely, and I barely got a word in. So I don't want to have that experience again.
No. Oh dear. Yes, I can imagine it's going to be. Well, I hope your anxiety. I mean, I hope you'll be able to cope with that pre-match nerves, that you're going to be able to do an amazing kind of event. And will Miriam from, is it Kick or Norton? Is it Norton Books or Kick? Oh, Norton. Are you going to be selling lots of copies and signing lots of publications for people?
Knowing me, you know, there'll be 3 people and the sound of crickets in the background.
Oh, it'll be amazing. I mean, you've got a great sort of lineup. It does look like a nice evening. If I was in London, I'd be right there enjoying it. It does say something like exclusive peculiar fragrance by perfumer Miriam Lena. Is that
Yes.
is she going to be spraying you with potent aftershave? And on that bombshell, we'll leave it there, because there were certain exciting things that were commented and discussed that were off the record. Yes, that's me in conversation with John Mendelssohn, talking about his life and also the David Bowie book, which is titled San Franscisco, 1971. I'll give you a link to the publication in the notes below. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just do C86 Show, and all those other social media platform sites. All these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Have a great week. Stay safe.